Hallie Bennett was the kind of person who could walk into a room mid-argument and somehow make everyone forget what they were fighting about. Not because she said anything clever, just because she laughed, and the laugh had this quality to it. Like it assumed the best of you before you'd even earned it. I found that out on the day she moved in. I'd posted the room listing on a Tuesday afternoon, mostly out of desperation. My previous roommate, a guy named Patrick who worked in logistics and never once replaced the toilet paper roll, had given me 3 days' notice before moving to Denver with a woman he'd known for 6 weeks. Which, good for him, but not great for my rent situation. The listing said, room in 2-bedroom Wicker Park apartment. Hardwood floors, good natural light, very quiet building. Looking for someone respectful and clean. No drama. Hallie responded within the hour. Her message was 3 sentences long. She said she was a pediatric nurse. She liked to cook on Sundays, and she hoped the no drama thing was negotiable because she had a large family and they were not. She wanted to be upfront, a quiet group of people. I almost passed. I'd specifically put that line in there because I was coming off a roommate situation that had involved, at various points, a passive-aggressive whiteboard note war, 2 visits from the building manager, and what I can only describe as a vibration-based dispute over the bass line in a Tame Impala song at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday. But I'd gotten 7 other responses, and none of them were from people I particularly wanted to share a kitchen with. So I said she could come see the place. She showed up on a Thursday evening with a tote bag from a farmer's market and a plant tucked under her arm, a small fiddle leaf fig in a terracotta pot. She handed me the plant before she even said hello, and I didn't know what to do with it, so I just held it while she looked around the apartment. I like it, she said after about 90 seconds. She ran her hand along the kitchen counter, the way people do when they're checking for dust. It was clean. I had cleaned. The light is good. You weren't exaggerating. I wasn't, I said. The plant is for the living room, she said, nodding at the fig in my hands. Or wherever. It doesn't matter. It just does better with indirect light. She moved in the following Saturday. I'm telling you all of this because I want you to understand how it started. Practical. Friendly but not overly so. We had an orientation conversation the first night, the kind where 2 adults who don't know each other try to establish the ground rules before anything goes sideways. I said I worked from home 3 days a week. I'm a technical writer for a software company, and I tended to be in work mode until around 6. She said she had rotating shifts, sometimes nights, and she'd try to keep quiet during the day, but couldn't always guarantee it. That's fine, I said. I also talk on the phone a lot, she said. My mom, my sisters. There, again, we're a lot. How many sisters? 3. I must have made a face because she laughed, and I got my first real experience of what that laugh did. It was hard to be tense around it. I'll try to keep it to the bedroom, she said. The calls. You don't have to, I said. I wear headphones. She said okay. We shook on it, actually, which felt formal and weird, but also somehow right. She had a firm handshake. The first 2 months were exactly what I'd hoped for. She was clean, she was considerate, and she was rarely home at the same time as me because of her schedule. On the nights she worked, the apartment felt like mine. On the nights she was off, she'd cook something and leave the leftovers labeled in the fridge with little sticky notes that said things like "eat me or yours if you want it" in green marker. I started wanting it. That's the first thing I should have paid attention to. Not in a dramatic way. Nothing about this was ever dramatic, which is maybe why I missed it for so long. It was just that I'd started to look forward to Tuesday nights, which was when she'd usually make a big batch of something. Chili, or roast chicken, or once, memorably, a red lentil soup that I thought about for 3 days straight, and she'd always make enough for both of us, even though she never asked if I wanted any, because she'd figured out somewhere along the way that I always did. We started eating dinner together on the nights our schedules lined up. First, it was a coincidence. Then it wasn't. She told me about her patients, not names, never names. She was careful about that, but the texture of her days. The 7-year-old who wanted to high-five her with both hands on every single visit. The family from Pilsen who always brought tamales to appointments. The father who cried in the hallway and then pulled himself together and walked back in like nothing had happened because his kid was watching. She talked about her job the way people talk about something that costs them something real, but they'd pay it again. I talked about mine, which felt comparatively low stakes, but she never made me feel that way about it. You make things make sense, she said once, when I'd explained what technical writing actually involved. That's not nothing. Most people can't do that. It's documentation, I said. So is a will, she said. Doesn't mean it's not important. I didn't have a response to that. I just looked at her, and she was already looking back out the window, fork in hand, completely unaware that she'd just said something that lodged itself somewhere in my chest. That was month 3. By month 4, she had claimed half of the left cabinet in the bathroom, not asked, just gradually occupied, the way water finds the low ground, and I had stopped noticing the bottles weren't mine. By month 5, she wore my Northwestern sweatshirt once, because she said she was cold and hers was in the wash, and then it reappeared on the hook by her bedroom door, and never quite made its way back. I didn't bring it up. I didn't want to bring it up. I was 31 years old, and I had not, historically, been great at this part of things. The part where you notice you might be in deeper than you planned, and then you have to decide what to do about it. My last relationship had ended 2 years earlier, not because of anything dramatic. I keep saying that, I know, but because we'd both been honest one night about what we actually wanted, and what we wanted turned out to be pretty different things. That had been the right call, and I knew it, but it had also left me with this tendency to overanalyze exits before I'd even fully entered. So I noted the sweatshirt. I noted the Tuesday dinners. I noted that she'd given me the aux cord in my own car, and then fallen asleep on the drive back from a hardware run in April, her cheek against the window, and I had turned the music down without thinking, and I filed all of it away and did nothing about it, because I was sharing an apartment with this person, and I didn't want to ruin the thing we had. Then she knocked on my bedroom door on a Friday night in October and said her cousin Bridget's wedding was in 3 weeks, and she needed to ask me something. You can say no, she started, which is never a great opener. Okay, I said. My ex is going to be there. She said his name was Scott. They'd dated for almost 2 years, broken up 8 months ago, and he was now apparently attending this wedding because he'd stayed close with her cousin's husband, who was his college roommate. She'd known this was coming and had been dealing with it internally for a while, and had arrived at the conclusion that she did not want to walk into that reception looking like she was still getting over it. Because she wasn't. She wanted to be clear, but also didn't want to deal with the questions that would come if she showed up alone. My family asks questions, she said. They're not mean about it. They have no concept of appropriate pacing. What would you need from me? I said. She leaned in the doorway. She was wearing the sweatshirt. Just to come with me, she said. As a date. We don't have to say anything specific. You could just be my +1 and be normal, and that's probably enough. Probably, I said. You're allowed to think about it. I don't need to think about it, I said. I'll go. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, okay, and went back to her room. I sat on my bed for a while after that, looking at my ceiling, thinking about how quickly I'd said yes and what that probably meant. The wedding was in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. 2-hour drive. We left on a Saturday morning in mid-October. Sky flat and gray, the way it gets in the Midwest, just before it decides to commit to fall. She drove, which I hadn't expected, and she made up a whole road trip playlist for the drive, which I also hadn't expected. And by the time we hit the Wisconsin border, we'd already argued pleasantly about whether Fleetwood Mac's best era was before or after Buckingham Nicks, and she was wrong, and I told her so, and she laughed. You're very confident for someone who put the chain on third, she said. Third is a power position, I said. Third is where you put a song you're not sure about. I'm very sure about the chain. Then it should be first. If it's first, there's nowhere to go but down. She thought about that. Okay, she said. That's actually a reasonable point. I still disagree with your methodology. The wedding venue was a restored farmhouse on the edge of the lake. She'd told me her family was a lot, and she was right, but in the way that a good restaurant is a lot, full and warm and a little overwhelming, but ultimately somewhere you want to be. Her mother, a woman named June with Hallie's same quality of making you feel immediately assessed and immediately liked, shook my hand and said, So you're the one she's been living with. Not accusatory, just observational. That's me, I said. She says you never complain, her mother said. She finds that suspicious. I have complaints, I said. I just pick them carefully. June seemed to approve of this. She squeezed my arm and moved on. The ceremony was on the lawn, under strings of market lights that weren't necessary yet, but would be in an hour. Hallie sat next to me, and at some point during the vows, without comment, reached over and straightened my tie. She didn't look at me while she did it. She was watching her cousin walk down the aisle. I sat very still. Cocktail hour was inside by the fireplace. That's where Scott materialized. I'll say this for him. He wasn't a villain. I'd built him up as something more complicated than he turned out to be. He was tall, friendly, the kind of guy who remembered names and could talk to anyone. He came over with a drink in each hand, and I watched Hallie's posture shift, not collapse, not crumble, just adjust, the way you adjust when something slightly cold touches your arm. "Hey," he said. He looked at me. "Scott, Ben." We shook hands. "You two together?" he asked. Casual, like it was a neutral question. I looked at Hallie. She looked back at me, and in that half second I understood that we had not actually planned this part. We had somehow prepared the exterior of this whole thing and left the interior completely empty. She took a breath. "Yeah," she said. "We are." Something happened when she said it. Not to her, to me, because I'd expected it to feel like a performance, and it didn't. It felt like a fact being stated, and the strangest part was that it felt like a fact because somewhere in the last 6 months it had become one. I just hadn't had the language for it yet. Scott nodded, said something about the venue being beautiful, moved along. Hallie exhaled slowly next to me. "That was fine," she said. "That was fine," I said. We didn't talk about it again for a while. The reception moved inside, the lights came on, and her 3 sisters found us at our table and proceeded to conduct what I can only describe as a low-intensity background interrogation, smiling the whole time, very polite and absolutely relentless. The youngest one, who looked like Hallie but laughed louder, asked me how long we'd been together. "A while," Hallie said, which was technically true. "What does that mean?" her sister said. "It means a while," Hallie said pleasantly. I was watching her. She wasn't nervous. She was, and this is the part I keep coming back to. Completely at ease, not performing. Just sitting in her family's house being exactly who she was, and I was sitting next to her, and it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the opposite of uncomfortable. And I realized I'd felt that way for months without knowing what to call it. They put Stevie Wonder on at some point, and she grabbed my hand without looking and said, "Dance with me." And that was also not a question. We danced badly. She was better at it than me and didn't pretend otherwise, and she made fun of me in real time, and I stepped on her foot once, and neither of us stopped smiling. Her mother found me at the bar later in the evening. "She's happy," June said. She wasn't asking. "I hope so," I said. "She's been happier since she moved in with you," she said. I noticed it in her voice on the phone. I didn't say anything at the time because I didn't know what it was. I didn't say anything. "Now I know what it was," she said, and went back to find her table. On the drive home, Hallie drove again. It was late, the highway was empty, and the playlist had gotten quieter. Somewhere around Kenosha, she said, without looking over a few for today, "You don't have to thank me." I said, "I want to," she said. It mattered. I looked out the window. The lake was gone behind us, just flat dark land now. "The yeah, we are thing," I said. She didn't ask me to clarify. She just waited. "I know that was for Scott," I said. "I know that was the whole point. I just want you to know that when you said it, I didn't mind that it wasn't true." She was quiet. "Because part of it felt like it was," I said. More quiet. I watched the road markers pass. "What part felt true to you?" she said. Her voice was careful. Not pulled back, just careful. "The part where I'm the person you call when something goes wrong," I said. "The part where I know your coffee order and you've had my sweatshirt for 4 months. The part where I drove 2 hours to a wedding and danced badly with you in front of your whole family and would genuinely do it again tomorrow." She didn't say anything for a while. The music changed, something slow. Then she said, "The sweatshirt was comfortable." "I know," I said. "I was going to give it back. I know that too." She took the exit toward the city, the skyline coming up ahead of us in the dark. "Ben," she said. "Yeah, what do you want to do about this?" "I want to stop pretending it's not happening," I said. "I'm done filing it away." She nodded slowly, not surprised. Maybe the opposite of surprised. "Okay," she said. "Me too." It was the simplest conversation. No grand declarations, no long parking lot speeches. Just 2 people in a car coming back from a wedding, saying out loud the thing they'd both been carrying around for months. I used to think those moments needed to be bigger. I've changed my mind. Sometimes the right thing sounds exactly like what it is. We got home close to midnight. She parked in the garage, and we walked up the stairs, and she stopped at the door to her room. "The sweatshirt," she said. "I'll get it. Keep it," I said. She smiled. Not the laugh, just the thing behind the laugh, quieter and more specific. The thing I'd been watching work its way toward the surface since the day she handed me a fiddle leaf fig and walked into my apartment like she'd always meant to end up there. "Good night, Ben," she said. "Good night, Hallie." The fiddle leaf fig is still in the living room. It's taller now. She was right about the indirect light. We've been together 8 months. We have 3 rules which we made up over a Sunday breakfast after a disagreement that started about grocery lists and became, briefly, about something more substantial, because that's how it goes when you actually care. The rules are: say the real thing, not the diplomatic version. Don't let something fester past 48 hours. And when one of you needs the other to just sit down and be there without fixing anything, you say so. You're allowed to need that. We got a second plant a few months ago. She let me pick it. I chose a pothos because I read that they're nearly impossible to kill, and I figured that counted for something.